Good morning, everybody. I'm Bob Giddings, and I'm here today to represent the Finance Committee and give everyone an update on our operating budget for 2021. First and foremost, the Finance Committee would like to thank the congregation for what we consider a remarkable year. The world has had a difficult year. All organizations have struggled in one way or the other. And we've been able to maintain our budgeted revenue throughout 2021. And so far, the pledge giving is right at our budgeted amount. It was based on last year's stewardship campaign. So everyone's paying on time and what they pledged to. And when you include the extra giving opportunities like Christmas in July and holiday giving, it's been beyond our expectations. So heartfelt thank you to the whole congregation for that. So this is our 2021 income budget that was put together last year. As you can see, the offering plate and wedding fees were budgeted at zero because of COVID. But the important thing to take note of, as these figures show, is your pledges during the annual stewardship campaign are by far the most significant part of the church's operating income. In fact, they were budgeted last year at 83%. Through September 30th of this year, we're tracking right at 100% of our plan. So thank you very much. On the expense side of the budget, you can see that what these expenses do is actually run the church. Salaries, office expense, all the ministries that we do at the church, the property expenses, repairs and maintenance, utilities, and the conference support apportionments are included in our expense budget. And this shows that our total budget expenses for the year were $534,000. Just as a point of reference, the total expense budget back in 2016 was $557,000. So I just thought that was an interesting piece of information to share as we go forward. As of the end of September 21, the expenses are running about $4,600 under budget for the year. So that's a testimony to our staff in the church. They do a great job, and we're very thankful for them at the way they manage to the budget every year. So in 2021, you might have noticed that the revenue was actually budgeted less than the expenses, and we projected a deficit for the year end at 2021. And you might be thinking, wow, is that normal? Well, last year at this time, when the Finance Committee gave this presentation, they talked about 2021 being the third year in a row that Maple Grove actually budgeted a deficit for the year. And I thought we could take a minute real quick and go back and see how that came out. So in 2019, the actual budget deficit was $27,000. So we were forecasting that at the end of the year, our revenues would have been short covering our expenses by $27,000. And as of November 30th of that year, we were running a deficit of almost $9,300. But in December, we received $60,000 in pledge contributions, which is about double the normal month that was being received that year. And that pushed our revenue up over $35,000 over budget for that year. So that basically turned a budgeted deficit into an actual surplus for 2019. 2020, again, a deficit was budgeted of $31,000 that year. And again, in November of 2020, we were running a deficit at that point of $16,700. But in December, another Christmas miracle, we received $60,000 in contributions, and that put us right at our budgeted revenue for the year, and it turned that deficit at the last moment to another surplus that year of $12,000. So this year, again, we were budgeting almost a $40,000 deficit. You may remember that last year, the church applied for a PPP loan from the SBA. Those were the loans that the federal government was offering to businesses and organizations as a payroll protection plan to keep people paid while people were being shut down for COVID. And we didn't receive notification last year about the status of our loan, but this year in the summer, after the SBA reviewed our loan, it was deemed forgiven. So we're not required to pay it back. So this year, we recognize that PPP loan as as revenue. And again, that's turning a projected deficit to an actual surplus for the year. So the last 3 years, we have budgeted a deficit, and we've been able to claw back to a surplus each year. But one of our challenges is it's not a good strategy to depend on Christmas miracles and PPP loans every year. So what we're seeing is that our operating surplus from the last few years is going to be needed going forward, because again, we will be budgeting deficits for the next few years. And the operating expenses are staying relatively flat. If you go back and look at that number from 2016, they were actually higher back then than they are now. So our staff and our finance committee are being good stewards of our finances and keeping the operating expenses relatively flat. But our problem is the revenue side, and that the revenue is decreasing. And I would say that it's not, the revenues are decreasing not because people are giving less. I don't think that's the problem. I think our problem is, less people are giving because our average pledge per commitment is increasing. So there's just less people committing. And that's where the issue lies. So I put this little table together to show kind of when I'm talking about the commitment cards back in 2018 were 183. Those are the cards that we got back during the stewardship campaign period. Some always come in after that, but for a point of reference, there was 183 cards that came back in 2018, and last year there was only 135. So any way you slice and dice it, there's less people giving, while the actual pledge per card has gone up $500 per card. So that's why we're saying in the foreseeable future, the budget will be presented as a deficit, and that surplus that we had will definitely need to be used to cover our operating expenses. So what can we do about it? If I had those answers, I'd certainly give you that. But what the finance committee is going to do is, first of all, we're going to set a realistic 2022 operating budget. And this happens every year. The Maple Grove finance team has a strong track record of setting good, realistic operating budgets for the church. really strong on knowing what the expenses are and managing to those expenses. The unknown is always the revenue side. But we're going to follow that tradition and put together a realistic operating budget for 2022. And something new we're going to do this year is we're going to put together a 3-year rolling budget projection. After we get the 2022 budget done, we're going to put together this projection so we can start looking forward and seeing what's ahead of us, and giving us more time to react to it every year. And of course, we're going to share this rolling forecast with the trustees, so both the finance committee and the trustees can use it as guidance for, strategic decision making as far as the finances of the church. And I guess my only point to add is that everyone can share their thoughts and ideas with each other and keep the conversation going on what we do going forward to help resolve the revenue issue for the church. So I want to give a shout out to Kathy Davis and Brad Hughes for sharing this PDF with me from previous years. So all I really had to do was update information, and I appreciate them sending that to me. So in closing, if you have any questions for me, you can email them over to Nancy. She'll forward them on to me. And if I don't know the answer, I'll find the answer for you. If I have the answer, I'll give you one. But other than that, keep the faith and pray for continued guidance. And thank you for listening today. And please get your commitment cards back as soon as possible. Thank you.